This is an example of one of our metro feats, and that's one of our former peddlers who just moved to Rochester for grad school in film. So far, we have 150,000 pounds collected, 1,000 gallons of fuel saved, and as of this, 800,000 calories burned, although now that's up to 900,000. Obviously, I've still got some room to go. So our vision is to use this vehicle, a cargo bike, to manage the organic waste stream from an entire city. And we call the system and the way the whole process works, the organic smart grid. Here's how it works. We start by dividing the city into districts. Then we establish a headquarters to keep operations costs down and lower travel time. And finally, we partner with urban agricultural centers that we call composts. Yeah, it's a pun. All right, here's some examples of compost in Austin, Springdale Farm, Urban Patchwork, Helping Hands Home, you name it. We've got 35 sites that we're composting with right now. This ranges from urban farms to community gardens, gardens at churches and schools, and even backyard gardeners that have a big operation would rather get free compost delivered than have to pay for it every year and get a delivery. So we have a distributed, networked, efficient, and adaptive system that allows us to expand across the city where we want to expand and grow where we need to grow. This reduces our operational costs by keeping it ultra local, which also helps fit with our brand. As I said, our customers can be anybody with food waste, so that's homeowners, apartments, you name it, anybody on this list. We've actually found, though, that young to middle-aged women are our biggest demographic. They tend to make a lot of the home purchasing decisions, and they care about the environment. So it's a great way for just to make a simple change in the home that fits with people's natural desires to reduce their impact on the world. All right, so normally my business partner Dustin gives this presentation, so imagine that he's where I am there. So our team is Dustin, our CEO, Marie is our Director of Operations. That's right, you see a huge amount being carried on that cargo bike. Jeremy is our Director of Growth, not Sales, we're a composting company. And Christina is our Director of Membership. With this team, we think we could take it to the next level. So you've heard, composting is gross. Well, we make it clean and easy. We've only had 2 people cancel for reasons other than I'm going to start composting my own. We've had a 95% customer satisfaction survey based on polls, and we were also awarded Austin Green Business Leaders, Best of Austin Green Business Program in 2013. They didn't do it in 2014, and we were to try to get it. And we were nominated for the Austin Chamber Sustainability and Environmental Responsibility Award. So we're ready to scale. We've got our team in place. We've got a smart grid infrastructure. We've got software that helps us manage everything in the field, and we've got great brand recognition. I'd like to change the way we think about waste. Thanks.
We want to start with some questions? Anybody have any questions?
Know where's the next neighbor?
All right, so right now we are deepening our marketing in Hyde Park, where we expanded to recently, and the next is Brentwood, North Loop, and the Triangle. So we're going to have to stop saying the East Side at some point pretty soon and just be the compost peddlers. Any other questions?
In this context, what do you mean by smart grid?
Yeah, so smart grid is an electricity grid term, but that electric grid is adaptive and intelligent, so it knows when things are going wrong. So using technology that we're deploying right now, we can tell the status of any one of our bays, which are like one part of a compost where we drop off compostables. We can know if it's full, if it needs work, if it's ready to receive information. And we can also reroute our peddlers based on this bay is full or there is a problem that needs to be addressed while you're out in this area. So we have an adaptive grid. There's still a lot of room for improvement in terms of route optimization and things like that could lead to lower operational costs, but we think that we have the tools in place to make that happen.
Can you talk a little bit about your business model? I'm assuming you're selling the
No, that's a great question. I should have mentioned that. We charge people to pick it up. It's as a recycling service, and then we donate it to the farmers and community gardeners. That allows us to have very low resistance to expanding our network because people like to get free fertilizer. It allows us to keep up with demand.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, if you'd like to try it out and live in our service area, we've got a coupon for a free month. Eric sent you, capital E, capital S, capital Y. Thanks.
Next of all, we got Miller Null from Bike Austin. He's got a lot of clipboards too.
I do. I'm going to pass these around as I'm talking. You also get a free sticker from this presentation. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Miller Nuttall. I'm campaigns director with Bike Austin. And this fall, there is a very historic election. I'm guessing many of you have heard about this in the city council. We are working to mobilize the biking and walking vote in the city council races this fall. How many people here know which council district they're in? Nice. That is one civically engaged group of people. I love it. So we're doing a few things to turn out the biking and walking vote. We're meeting with candidates face-to-face to interview them on their stances on biking and walking. We're sending out questionnaires. And most importantly, we're collecting pledges to vote for bike and pedestrian-friendly candidates, which are on the clipboards that are being passed around right now. It's basically a symbolic commitment to vote for candidates that will stand up for safer streets, complete streets, bike lanes, better pedestrian infrastructure. What we're talking about today, actually, walkable, bikeable cities. So we're shooting to get 5,000 of these citywide by the election. We're a good chunk of the way there. We're over a fifth of the way there at this point. And the way that this pledge works is it's one, a symbolic show of your support, two, it's a way to increase voter turnout. So signing one of these pledges means that you'll get a friendly, beautifully designed postcard in the mail right before election day to remind you to vote. Those increase your chances of voting by up to 12%. The Obama campaign has tested it. And we will also convey our endorsements to you. So once we make up our mind about who we'll be endorsing this year, we'll let you know who they are so you can take that into account when you're voting. That's the gist of it. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
This is a little orthogonal to what you're talking about, but I'm wondering if you're doing a candidate questionnaire and what your response rate is like.
Good question. We are indeed doing a candidate questionnaire. We just sent it out this week, so it's not really complete data yet, but hopefully it'll be pretty robust. What is indicative is that a lot of the candidates are responding to us and saying they want to meet with us, so that's a good sign that they're taking an hour out of their campaign to hear what we have to say. Any other question? Great. So these clipboards are coming around. Please sign up. It's great if you want to put all your information. We're a nonprofit. We never sell it or anything. The key piece of information is your address so that candidates know you're in their district. Otherwise, they just don't care about you. It's a cold game out there. Yeah, but that's it, and I'll collect them at the back of the room when I'm done. Yes?
Is there one district that you have your eye on the most, or are you looking at all of them?
We're looking at all of them this fall. The district that will likely not go to a runoff election is District 9, where we're in right now. So just in terms of the immediacy of that election, we're focused on that. But they're all very important.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks a lot. Next of all, we're going to Austin for Social Good. Just going to spend a couple minutes talking about what they're working on, and then we're going to get right into the two major presentations for tonight.
Okay. Hi, my name is Gwen Jewis. I'm a project manager with Austin for Social Good. We are a small band of volunteers that's actually an affiliate of the New York-based Plus Social Good organization. And Ruben Cantu, who's the head of our group, is actually in New York right now because there is the International Social Good Summit going on yesterday and today in New York. So he's up there and talking about good things happening in Austin. Our group was started a few years ago. Ruben had gathered a bunch of folks, mostly like yourselves, over at Alamo Draft House and streamed the summit from New York I gotta back up, but that's the problem. Okay, sorry, I forgot. And at that, all the people there decided that traffic was something that people could wrap their heads around and help to make an influence and change something for the better of the community. That within 6 months turned into our first work from home day. Our goal was to get 10,000 cars off the road. We got about 14,000 cars off the road that day, and we continued moving on. We had another one that was in September, midweek one. That one was not nearly as successful. In the meantime, the city asked us to come in and do it for a whole week, realizing that they have some folks, just like all employers, you have those steadfast meetings you have to be at, and then other days it would be easy to work from home. So this October, the 21st to the 24th, will be Mobility Week, and there you should start to see a lot of publicity about it. We are working with Movability Austin, we're working with Rival Company, the city, of course, Cap Metro. The chamber has been really great in holding a big press conference last week, and we're in the process of recruiting the top 20 employers in town to be a leadership circle and show that business really needs to help lead the way and do this. So you'll see a lot of things coming up in the next week, and then please take advantage of Mobility Week. I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments.
What can regular people like us do to help contribute to the campaign?
What we'll be doing is asking everybody to, if you can telecommute, or if you can take mass transit, walk, bicycle to work, do any of those things, but get out of your single occupancy vehicle. We do have a website that's mobilitysolution, without the s.org, and you can go there and you can sign up as an individual. You can request that information be sent to the HR person or somebody else within your corporation if you're within one of the bigger companies in town.
Do y'all provide any services for the Grays in the audience? In particular, there is a service, I believe, called Drive a Senior, for folks who maybe are a little older than I am, have trouble getting that first mile or last mile, either to the transit or to the doctor or do their shopping, and they rely on volunteers who will work through their network or through the Capital City Village network or other senior networks, but to further assist mobility for those of us who are still in a town that's based on having to drive everywhere. Well, it's kind of seemed parallel to some of your goals.
Right. Austin Plus Social Good is not focused totally around mobility. It happened that mobility was the issue that had come up in that very first gathering of people. We do, in September, or this year will be October, during Startup Week, we do a fast pitch contest, and we have a social innovators fund for social entrepreneurs. Last year we raised $5,000, and Carl Settles with E for Youth won our pitch off at that event, and then came back and talked at our all-day South by event about what he had done with the money and the additional support that he received. So we have finalists now that are on our Austin Plus Social Good site for that event that's coming up, and you're welcome to donate to our Social Innovators Fund or to come to our October 8th pitch off.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Austin Plus Social Good. So now we're gonna get into the right into the middle of the presentation. So next of all, we've got Nathan Welch with the City of Austin Bike Program.
Try to get this how we did some issues with the
All right, thanks for having me. I'm here with Robert Amerson. Where are you, Robert? So Robert's going to talk to you about all things pedestrian and lots of other policy-related stuff. I'm here with the bicycle program with the City of Austin, and just to get a feel for who you guys all are, who here makes trips by bike occasionally? Okay, and who knows that the city's updating the bicycle master plan right now? All right, so this will be a bit of news to you guys.
I have some issues with that.
Issues?
Yeah, sorry.
So you need to switch the input on the TV. Right now you're on Apple TV. Is it an airplane or an airplane?
All right.
We'll do it real, Josh.
Well, I'll just keep
This is
going.
on this is
Oh.
Apple TV right now.
So the city's updating its bicycle plan. It was last updated in 2009, which doesn't seem that long ago. But a lot has changed in the last 5 years, which has influenced updated again. So we're kind of in the final stages of it. We're briefing you guys after all the boards and commissions, so you guys are very highly thought of. But the next step for us is to go essentially to city council. All right. So we're pretty late in the process right now. So we're updating the bicycle plan, and why do it? It's because so much has happened in the last couple of years. One of the big things that's happened is that Austin now has a comprehensive plan that's been updated. Do you guys know of Imagine Austin? It sets the kind of collective community vision that the policymakers of Austin adopted. So one of the big things to come out of it is that there's these 8 priority programs. And this is how we get to our, these are the priority implementation programs, and this is how we get to our vision of what Austin should be. So one of the biggest ones is invest in a compact and connected Austin to enhance walkability, bikeability. Other big ones that touch bicycling and that bicycling can positively affect are bringing about the creative economy, developing a good, healthy, supportive workforce. Water and green infrastructure certainly have relation to how bikes do not damage the environment in the same way. And then household affordability is something that's getting a lot of attention right now. And the second biggest household expense is the cost of transportation. So certainly bicycling has a role in that. Lastly, healthy Austin. So kind of in line with what bicycling can do to bring about Imagine Austin, we changed the vision of the bike plan to say, not what can the city of Austin do for biking, but what can bicycling do for the city of Austin to achieve its goals. So that's a big switch around. And we actually took steps to quantify the realm of magnitude that we're talking about, that bicycling can actually bring about those changes. So the bike plan is a number of, there's 5 different E's that they talk about: the engineering, education, encouragement, enforcement, and evaluation. Most of these are staying pretty similar, and the engineering one, the infrastructure that you see on the ground, is the one that's most drastically changing because of our new approach. So this is a little piece of data that describes the population and why a different approach is really appropriate. So there's about 2% of any population that, and these are, this is data from Austin from a statistically valid phone survey. So this is actually what makes up our community. So there's 2% of Austinites that would ride a bike on any street. And it probably looks something like that right now. So if you paint a bicycle line on the street, just a painted line that you could easily drive across, there's 15% of the population that feels confident enough to go ride a bike after that. And there's 44% of the population that's not interested in riding a bike, or they're not physically able, they live too far from work, whatever, and that's fine. What that leaves, though, is 40% of the population that we're not speaking to with our approach to painting bicycle lines. And if you start adding elements of physical protection, you can see a picture here. This is on Bluebonnet Lane in South Austin. Just with some flexible posts and that element of physical protection, you start getting young families, kids, elderly people comfortable riding a bike. So by changing to a more protected infrastructure approach, we think we can target 55 and even up to 60% of the population in the urban area. So this is what it looks like. This is the drag now, since we've revamped it. This is Bluebonnet again. This is Barton Springs Road. You can see people on bikes are separated from the traffic. So the second really big focus of this bicycle plan update, or really a piece that allows us to get down to the quantifying the impact of bicycling, is that we need to go after short trips. So this is a plot of who takes what mode of transportation by trip distance, and this is data
from somewhere in the world that is friendly for walking and bicycling and transit use and driving, but it's not here. And you can see the trends that you would expect, like walking is the predominant mode for very short trips. Driving and transit are better for longer trips. And then bicycling, you can see, has this kind of optimum spot where around 1.5 to 2 miles, if you have the right conditions, it's the most flexible, it's the fastest, easiest mode to get around if you pull safety off the table, which here we haven't yet pulled safety off the table. It's part of everybody's choice. So what we talked about doing is, this is, I'll confess, Dutch data. This is from the entire country though, it's not even Amsterdam data. So we're an urbanized area, mostly. So if we set targets about what we think we can realistically catch and conservatively catch, we can start to put numbers to how much bicycling we can anticipate. So we say that we're going to try to catch 15% of trips from 0 to 3 miles and 7% of trips between 3 and 9 miles. So we feel like this is very conservative and achievable, and the impacts are pretty significant. So here's a map of short trips in Austin. If these are the trips we're going to go after, so you can see the entire kind of central area has a ton of short trips. And even down to a major congested intersection like 5th, 6th, and Lamar, over 50% of the trips going through that intersection are less than 3 miles. So there's incredible potential to get intersections that are really clogged up and congested much more freed up if we switch those people to riding by bike. So this is the last piece of the puzzle for the plan update, and it's the potential of a complete network. So right now, our bike lane network, not even our protected network, we don't even have a protected network yet, but our bike lane network is so incomplete that only 33% of major arterial roads have a bike lane. So if you want to get from A to B, you're going to be in places that you probably don't want to be. So there's a couple of lines in this. So the City of Austin bicycle mode share has been drifting upwards pretty consistently. So we used to be about 1% back in the 2000s and even 2005, and then we've been adding a lot of bicycle lanes and we've been getting good response. In the center part of the city, which is this red line, you can see an even stronger response over the last few years. So the green line on the plot is the city of Portland, and over 20 years they've been putting in bicycle boulevards, bicycle lanes, way before we were really making a strong go at it. And you can see that they got their bicycle mode share up to about 6%, which is about what we have in the center part of the city. So this is change over time, so the steeper the better if you want to see more bicycling. And the most notable story here is that Seville, Spain, in 3 years put in a protected network, so not the bike lane stripes, but the protected bicycle facilities, and went from almost nothing to 7% in a very short time. They coupled this with a large bike share system, which we have recently gotten one off the ground. But we think this kind of transformation is possible here if we take the right approach. So the approach combines 3 elements. So we don't have, a lot of what we do is retrofit existing streets. So we don't have the space or the money to just widen roads everywhere and get what we want. So we're gonna have to piece it together. So protected bike lanes on big streets like we did on the drag, using quiet streets with traffic calming to make them really comfortable for everybody, people of all ages and abilities. Getting people across intersections where there's major streets that they have to cross, so making these small streets connect, essentially. And then lastly, I'll put a little plug in for the urban trails. It's not under our program, but there's an urban trail urban trail plan that's going to council this Thursday. And if you're interested in seeing a network of these type of trails built out, you should definitely go and register your opinion about that. And so these urban trails are the third component of what will stitch together the city and make a complete network. So an urban trail, just for clarity, is not necessarily what we see around the hike and bike trail around the lake. These are hard surface trails that you could use by biking, walking, rollerblading, skateboarding. They're all weather for recreation and transportation and take care of all these modes. So these are all the modes together, and that forms our complete network. And we're looking to put this network to a test where an 80-year-old and an 8-year-old should each be able to use it. So that's a pretty strenuous test that most of our streets do not today pass. So this is a map of what we think is possible. This is something that we think we could do in the near term without major reconstructions. This is just reallocating the space in our existing street assets. It's all compatible with existing traffic volumes, on-street parking. And you can see it's pretty extensive and really serves that area. Can you guys make out this map really at all?
What's the green and red?
Here, I'll point, yeah. So the red is trails, the urban trails, and the green is the on-street stuff. This is 183 here, this is the lake, and then this is like Den White down to the south, and Mopac and I-35. So just, there's way too many details to get into it, but it would be a pretty robust network that connects to the central part of the city, gets people into the city from outside areas on nice, safe, protected facilities. It also serves local destinations like parks, and schools, and things like that. And here's a map of, this is a little more simple of just the urban trails, and this is what's going to council on Thursday. We're also looking at what the top barriers are. Independent of just creating a protected network, we still have lots of existing barriers in our existing system. So we're looking to solve those. So another really big focus of this update is in focusing on those short trips, there's the opportunity for the first and last mile connection to transit and building on those transit trips. So here's Lakeline Station on the red line. You guys know it? All right, so here's a half-mile walking radius. Very impressive, Robert. Very, very impressive. Here's a 2-mile biking radius, which if you do some geometry is 16 times larger of a land area. So there's a lot of potential to get those people to the transit station. Walking to transit stations is very cool. No insult. So there's, and 2 miles is a short bike ride. So there's a lot of neighborhoods around here that have access to this transit station if we had the right facilities in place. So this plan also looks at what we can connect up to the station. So these are the on-street opportunities and then the regular trails. So when you do that, you're going to end up with a lot of bikes at the station. You want to park them there rather than put bikes on the train because that space is very valuable. They're already filled up. Cat Metro is already working on that. That's one of their stations at Kramer. I think they have like 7 on the ground right now. When you get off the train, you won't have a bike, but maybe you'll have a bike share. So there's a station right there at the convention center. So looking over time to better integrate them and expand that bike share system. So the on-street facilities are very cost effective because we're largely retrofitting something that we already have on the ground. So we're doing it at about $50,000 to $500,000 a mile. For comparison, 4-lane arterial is $22 million a mile. 6-lane freeway is about $51 million a mile. That's data from Campo. So we're doing this for almost nothing. Urban trails are a little more expensive. They're actual civil engineered type of facilities that require construction, and they're taking about 3 to 8 years from inception to completion, and they cost about $1.5 to $2 million a mile. So back to the numbers of it, our analysis shows that we're telling the story in a couple different ways about what the benefits are of bicycling to the city. So this is the downtown and university area. The transportation department has started calling this the ring of congestion. Does it sound right? So there's about 300,000 daily regional trips that end up in this ring. 36% of those are less than 3 miles. There's another percentage that's between the 3 and 9 miles. If we apply those trip capture targets, where the proposed bike network serves these trips, what we end up with is about a 7% reduction of motor vehicle trips to this area. So we think that's pretty big. We compared that to the Mopac Improvement Project. So if you guys like XY plots and getting nerdy, so this is the dollar value of the project versus the number of people delivered to the downtown area. So you can see that the proposed bike network for $155 million. Sounds like a lot. We never spent that much money on bikes, but it delivers roughly the same number of people to the downtown area every day as what we're doing to Mopac right now. So it's not to say we shouldn't do what we're doing to Mopac, but to solve our mobility problems, we're going to need to do a lot of different approaches. So in addition to performing at that kind of regional project level, it also takes a lot of trips off the network that aren't bound to downtown. So just some quick numbers, there's 170,000 trips pulled off the network every day. That's 460,000 daily vehicle miles traveled, so that's a lot of, you can start to calculate a lot of other benefits from that. So just in direct driving costs, that's about $170 million to people, Austinites, a year. That's fuel, insurance, direct driving costs to the user. And then from a public health perspective, that's the equivalent of 15% of all of Austinites just by this, by getting around by bicycle, meeting their daily minimum activity level. So that's what we think bicycling can do for Austin. So yeah, we've briefed all of our boards and commissions. We did not get an endorsement from the Planning Commission, kind of on a fluke. They have 9 members, and you have to have 5 votes to get it, and they only had 5 people, so we had 4 people supporting and 1 against. So we're gonna try to go back to them, and then go back to council in November. And then lastly, real quick, this is some figures on how much bicycle lanes we've been putting in. So you can see we're doing about 40 miles a year. It's been increasing over the last few years. This is the number of total miles of bicycle lanes, so we're a little over 200 now. And this buffer to protected, you can see, is almost nothing, and then now we're up at about 20 miles, and that's constantly expanding as we've shifted our focus to putting more of those in. And just a quick fun thing, this is the expansion of the bike network to today. And then we looked at this with a Seville plot, but you can see this is the bicycle infrastructure that we've been putting in. So this is the number of miles of bicycle lanes, so we're a little over 200. And you can see that right after we started doing that, we started getting this really strong response in the center part of the city. So.
5 to 10 minutes for questions.
To what extent does 10 Web catalyze pushing the bike plan at this point?
I think that's probably a better question for like the Bike Austin folks that were here. I think from a staff perspective, 10.1 is certainly going to be a change in certainly how we report back, and we'll just have to play it by ear as to what we're asked to do. But I think to the mobility and the vision of what Austin has said it wants to be, it's certainly still relevant.
Are you adding non-protected bike lanes still, or are you just doing?
Yeah, so I don't have a percentage. I would guess that probably 80% of our bicycle lanes are not protected.
But in terms of the new miles?
Yeah, exactly. So protected ones, you need a fair amount more space to pull off. Okay. And that's not always true. I showed some pictures of some two-way, like on Bluebonnet Lane, two-way protected facilities, and you can actually save some space by putting the buffer all on one side and the bike path together. But we generally feel comfortable doing that on lower volume streets. So when you get under a street like, say, South Lamar, I don't think it's a good option. So we're still putting a lot of painted bicycle lanes, and we're building out that network.
Is it becoming any easier to take right-of-way away from cars in order to build these kind of protected bike lanes?
I feel like biking is definitely more normalized than it was, say, 5 years ago. And one of the things that's been really interesting about putting in protected bicycle lanes is that we see proof of that chart that it appeals to more people, because when we put in bicycle lanes, there's always a few supporters that show up. But then the people that, say parking was affected in front of their house, they'd be like, why are you putting this in? Nobody's going to use it. But if you put in a protected bike lane, I think they empathize in a different way. They're like, oh, maybe I could personally use that, because they weren't thinking they could ever use a bike lane. So it's definitely changed the conversation, and I think we get a lot bigger, faster response out of it.
I live a block from the Bluebonnet bike lane.
Yes.
And I've been watching it for the couple of years that it's been in place. And I can tell you two things. One is it's poorly designed for the vehicles that have to maneuver around it. And the second thing is those plastic bollards give a very dangerous illusion of safety for the people who are in there. They're constantly having to replace bollards that drivers have gone over. And it's common for motorcycles and small cars to duck into that bike lane to go around cars that are waiting to make a left turn. If you don't have something that is absolutely solid, drivers in this city view it as an optional lane. That's just how that thing is being used.
Yeah, we've gotten some data from the Bluebonnet, and certainly I would look at those barriers that are on Bluebonnet as kind of like the beta barriers, and we're looking to, as we move forward in time and spend more money for bicycle infrastructure, like concrete barriers or something planted would be great. But right now, that's not a possibility. So we're looking at different options, like some like the bumps that are on 4th Street next to the rail track. So there's different devices that we can use. And then with any bicycle facility, and really any traffic lane, like you'll see people park on 6th Street downtown, like big trucks delivering stuff. Like there's abuse of the stated intent of any space. So certainly like enforcement and monitoring that behavior change over time is an important thing.
So because the old bike master plan is from 2009 and so many new lanes have been added, and maybe this is a question for Tom, actually, is a map of what's currently on the ground available somewhere?
Oh, I showed it to you.
Yes, I know that.
I mean, we'll have existing maps in the updated plan that you'll be able to see, but I mean, I can pull that slide back if you want, but.
No, I just didn't know, as we sort of come to mobility.
Yeah, and Tom has the current bike map, which is the catalog of, you don't have to get nerdy about what type of bike lane is where, but it'll tell you where it's good to ride.
Let's get 2 more questions.
Is there any new funding sources for this infrastructure coming?
No, that's a good question. The $155 million that we've estimated to build out this network, which I should clarify, includes both the protected on-street network and the highest priority urban trails, because those all work together to form the network, is all almost entirely unfunded. So this is really a cost-benefit case of saying, if we spend $190 million on the North Mopac Improvement Project, we really might want to consider spending some serious money to get the benefits that we're talking about on the bike network.
Is awareness of non-cyclists and education of non-cyclists part of this at all?
Like education to drivers?
Drivers who are unfriendly towards cyclists or don't understand the rules or the laws.
Right.
Is that part of it?
So yeah, I talked mostly about the changes from the 2009 plan. The 2009 plan already contains a lot of policy guidance on pursuing those type of education programs. And really that's the bicycle program currently has 4 people in it. We have 1 vacant position that's getting filled. We have 1 person that has a focus on programs, and that's certainly not enough to pull off like citywide education campaigns. So the more we can prioritize doing this type of work, the more we can get done. But there's already planning level guidance saying that we should be doing it. And there's often, also a bunch of nonprofit partners in town that have capacities to do some amount of that work.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, next up, let's get Robert Anderson from City of Austin's Planning and Development.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Robert Anderson. I'm with the Planning and Development Review Department. Nathan did a really good job talking about a relatively discrete project. He has that benefit. What the city of Austin is doing in terms of walkability is not so tidy, unfortunately. So I will do my best to capture what a number of different departments are working on. Again, it's sort of spread across a number of different entities, including infrastructure and programs. So I may not be able to answer all questions, but I'll try to do my best on that. I got into pedestrianism about 12 years ago. I got rid of my car, interested in urban planning issues. I've kind of been focused on urban planning since then, and have the luxury in my position at the Planning and Development Review Department to have a fairly wide latitude in terms of what I pursue, and so I'm pushing my portfolio as much as possible into the direction of all things walking. Nathan mentioned the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan, so I'm going to run through this really quickly just so that we are on a sort of a common framework. The Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan, adopted in 2012, really speaks to a new vision, a 30-year plan for what Austin is going to be, accommodating a lot of new people and a lot of new development. How are we going to address such things as transportation issues, as housing issues, traffic congestion issues, water conservation, affordability, things like that. The need to do that was because our previous comprehensive plan was very old, and a plan that old simply cannot adapt or properly respond to current challenges that a city faces. In particular, we have a whole lot of new people that are coming into Austin. We have, give or take, about 100 new people moving to the region every single day. Where are these people moving? How are they getting around? It speaks very directly to transportation challenges and housing challenges. The Imagine Austin plan speaks to a community-wide vision. It's a way for us to manage that change, and more importantly, it's a mandate for how the city operates in terms of our spending of dollars, in terms of our policies that we create. We have to comply with the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan. That's a charter mandate for the city of Austin. We had a lot of community engagement, a lot of input into the plan, so there was a lot of buy-in and a whole lot of people participating in that process over a couple-year time frame leading up to the adoption. The themes of the Imagine Austin sort of provide the framework for the particular action items that are contained within the Imagine Austin plan, and they sort of really go into the idea of how are we going to address that growth? Well, we're going to do it by building and accommodating that growth through activity centers and corridors. That's really the prime opportunity for us. And that results in this. This is what is called the growth concept map. These scattered regions and centers throughout the city of Austin, and the lines, the corridors, are these major streets where we want the growth to happen. The priority programs, the 8 priority programs of Imagine Austin provide us that direction for change. The first, and these are ranked priority programs, by the way, from the community. The highest ranking program is Invest in a Compact and Connected Austin. The community recognizes the inherent benefits environmentally, active transportation-wise, of building complete communities where people can provide for their daily needs within a relatively short period of time. A relatively short geographic space, rather. The second priority program, sustainably manage our water resources. Won't talk about that tonight, but that's definitely important. Invest in our workforce education systems and entrepreneurs. Won't talk about that either. Use green infrastructure to protect environmentally sensitive areas and integrate nature into the city. Part of what Nathan could have talked about was the urban trails system and how that connects to walking and biking sort of off of the street network. That would definitely be a part of what we would consider to be the green infrastructure program, but again, I won't necessarily talk about that tonight. Grow and invest in Austin's creative economy. Develop and maintain household affordability. This create a Healthy Austin program. I currently staff the Healthy Austin Priority Program. Each priority program has a PDR staff liaison to a lead agency. The Health and Human Services Department is the Healthy Austin lead agency. And a lot of what we do actually deals directly with the recognition that how we build our communities directly impacts public health. We're looking at such things as obesity, the associated illnesses, diabetes, psychological stresses of lack of nature, things like that. So there's a very direct connection. And then lastly, revised development regulations to promote a compact and connected city. With the implementation, or rather the adoption of Imagine Austin, we're kind of in a fuzzy gray area right now where the vision produced by this community vision simply cannot be achieved with our current land development code. That's why the very first thing out of the Imagine Austin gate was to set up a system where we are revising our land development code. Who here has heard of Code Next? Okay, good. I hope the rest of you will look into that, and I hope all of you will engage in that process. It's a hugely important task because the land development code regulations are what drives how we use our land. If you like a store next to you in order to be within that 2 to 3 mile biking distance, the particular zoning code governs whether you can do that. If you like to be able to walk to a transit station, the street connectivity requirements built into the code are what is important to achieve that, things like that. So here's where I get into territory where I'm not particularly familiar, but is sort of inherent to talking about walkability. The sidewalk program out of the Public Works Department is staffed by a few people, and they work specifically on basically bringing the city's infrastructure into ADA compliance. They have a new sidewalk construction program as well as a maintenance crew, and I'll talk about both individually. Some of you may have seen the Chronicle cover story a few months back, and some of those individuals were interviewed for that story, and it really spoke quite eloquently to the problem facing the city of Austin. We have a fairly incomplete sidewalk network, and it's actually on the order of $1 billion problem, where for many decades we weren't building sidewalks or weren't requiring developers to build sidewalks within their development projects. And that has escalated to the point now where we have a fairly serious problem, and even our maintenance program now isn't receiving the dollars we need to keep up with the maintenance issue. Current sidewalk statistics is we have about 2,600 miles of sidewalks, but we have over 110,000 driveways. This is something that doesn't really come up very often, as sort of the conflict points of vehicles entering and exiting driveways seriously degrades the sidewalk network. So part of what I do, and I'll talk about this a little bit later through small area planning and corridor planning, is trying to reduce the frequency of those driveways off of main roads. A major initiative of the Public Works Sidewalk Program is to maintain the Sidewalk Master Plan. This was a document put forth in 2009 and really developed a quite sophisticated system of evaluating the missing sidewalk network within the city of Austin, considering such things as pedestrian attractors, considering such things as, like I said, I don't know all of this stuff. Available funds, and pedestrian safety score. These things are built into a GIS system and ranks missing sidewalk segments in on a sort of a scale between high priority, all the way down to very low priority. And the state of funding right now is basically if you're not high or very high priority, you're not getting a sidewalk built. They are in the process of updating the sidewalk master plan to reflect the sidewalk segments that have been completed since 2009. And obviously the fact that Imagine Austin has come into place since this plan was originally adopted is going to change the content of that plan. The current sidewalk programs has an improvements program as well as a maintenance program. The improvements program and the maintenance program are both bond funded with some transportation user fees funding. the improvements program has successfully built some new sidewalks as well as gotten to the point where we are updating and providing for ADA compliance successfully with 21 miles of ADA transition plan and total sidewalks improvements are 124 with 2,500 ramp repairs. So that's fairly significant if you look at the number of intersections across the city of Austin, and providing for, you're looking at 2 ramps then for each street corner on each intersection. So you're looking at, bad at math, 2, 4, 6, 8 curb ramps per intersection then to ensure that traditionally, in the recent past, you saw 1 curb ramp at the very corner of each intersection. That's not ADA compliant because an individual in a wheelchair, an individual that's visually impaired, would sort of take that angle of the curb ramp and it directed them straight into the middle of the intersection. So what you want to achieve actually is a more perpendicular curb ramp so that people are heading straight towards the other side of the street in a safe way. The update priorities, and I was actually just in a meeting with John Eastman today on this, and he's really good. He understands the importance of active transportation, and he's a strong supporter of the Imagine Austin principles. So while they're updating the sidewalk master plan, they're looking primarily to look at best practices around the country. They're looking to update the prioritization map, again, reflecting within their mapping systems all of the sidewalks that have in fact been complete, as well as all of the new development that's happened. So if you consider such things as the conflicts that have happened between drivers and pedestrians, as well as all of the new pedestrian attractors, that's going to change our prioritization system. New sidewalks that were previously low ranked may have actually elevated someone within the system. They're actually looking now to achieve a sidewalk maintenance program. So right now our maintenance is also done through bond funds, and if you consider asset management, relying upon a public vote is probably not a very good practice. So building in place a system where we have a reliable and steady source of funds to maintain our sidewalks infrastructure is a good thing. And then updating the ADA sidewalk transition plan. The street and bridge operations is a maintenance program, basically. So the sidewalk program builds the new sidewalks and ADA facilities. The street and bridge operations maintains existing facilities. So something like that would want to be fixed, right? 2013, they repaired a significant number of sidewalks and constructed a number of curb ramps. So these are things that are going to be continued to be built and constructed, and this is out of the same pool of money, out of the same Public Works division. If you have an issue with a sidewalk, please call 311. Those calls and those issues are routed to the appropriate staff, and those issues are repaired. They operate on a fairly quick turnaround time, so if you don't see an issue resolved, please call back. New program, sidewalk lifting and sidewalk grinding. So something like this, where we have an issue where you see a utility provision or a drain manhole cover obstructing the sidewalk and providing ADA compliance, you will lift the sidewalk. Or if you have those joints like I saw, or like we provided earlier, something much less serious than this, obviously, but where a joint sort of separates a little bit and you have an obstruction to a flat plane, to actually grind that surface down in order to provide a level surface. Pedestrian improvements and street reconstruction. These are improving existing facilities due to redevelopment efforts. And something that would govern whether a street reconstruction is taken into consideration are various programs and policies within the city of Austin. Complete streets or great streets, sidewalk master plan, subchapter E standards, university and neighborhood overlay, as well as some ADA compliance issues. I'm going to jump departments now, just because I can. Transportation department, their arterial management division, does the pedestrian hybrid beacons. Do we know what those are? They are the mid-block pedestrian activated crossing devices that you'll see in such places as on Burton Springs. You'll also see them on South Congress, a couple on South First. We are leading the nation for the number of these devices installed. It's kind of a dubious honor, actually, because it really speaks to the fact that we have a history of building incredibly long blocks where pedestrians simply don't have the ability to cross the street. So now we're having to go back in and retrofit these facilities. So we have quite a few now in Austin. There were 34 last year, 7 in construction for 2014, but we have nearly 100 in a queue right now where individuals are requesting. Obviously, we don't have anywhere near that money, so they developed a prioritization system similar to the missing sidewalk system, where it allows them to rank requests according to such factors as how long the blocks are, how many pedestrians are using, how many pedestrian attractors are nearby, things like this in order to evaluate PHB requests and get those in with the limited funding that's available. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. The Complete Streets policy recently adopted is going to be a major opportunity to improve both pedestrian as well as bicycle safety and mobility. A complete street is one that is designed for all users of all ages and all abilities. There are nearly 700 policies around the country, and the City of Austin's, we had an early Complete Streets policy in 2002. Wasn't even called Complete Streets, but this update is really pushing the boundaries of what is a complete street now. Instead of the traditionally mobility aspects of a complete street, in other words, providing for opportunities for pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, we're also now looking at such things as how do we provide for green infrastructure within the city's right-of-way space? How are we dealing with such things as water quality, stormwater, things like that? The City of Austin's policy is, again, to serve all users in all modes. It's to require connected travel networks. It also has a significant urban design element within this. Provision of mere infrastructure, be it a sidewalk or a bike lane or a protected bicycle facility, is not good enough. These have to be enjoyable, comfortable spaces. Anywhere from 1/4 to 1/3 of all street space is city-owned space, and we need to treat these as more than conduits for channeling cars. These are spaces for civic interaction. These are spaces for entertainment. These are places for recreation and enjoyment. So we need to do more in terms of how we design these spaces to handle traffic. We need to encourage investments in such a way as to create enjoyable and healthy city space. We also have standards in place to allow the policy to evolve according to new understandings of what our best practices. So it's not a static policy, but we will monitor that and change as best practices change. And then I mentioned the green infrastructure. That's going to be a major component of that. We have a green infrastructure priority program team of Imagine Austin that is specifically looking at what would be a green street, and that was written directly into the Complete Streets policy. And then all roadways and all projects in all phases. And so it's not just looking at City of Austin projects, but it applies to all private projects, and it's going to be applied to not only the final design, but how we scope and fund those projects from the outset. And then requiring appropriate performance measures. If we're mandating this, if we're expecting this to be a feature to enhance the safety and enjoyment for users within the street system, we need to provide adequate performance measures, and we need to make sure that we're doing a good job. I'm going to jump into Urban Design Division. Part of what the Urban Design Division of the Planning and Development Review Department does is look at the Great Streets Master Plan, the Great Streets Program. This preceded Complete Streets in some ways and is bounded and specifically applies to the downtown area, but kind of the same recognition and the same components of what a complete street is in terms of ensuring that we have an adequate and robust economic space, that we have wide sidewalk space, provision of street trees, provision for utilities, street furniture, things that make a good downtown. That's what the Great Streets Program does. And I actually have more on this. So there are 3 ways that a Great Streets Program is funded. Part of that is through the CIP process. Part of that is through the Great Streets Development Program. This is a program set in place basically to encourage private developers to comply with Great Streets standards, and we're going to cost share with them. If we want them to do something on the street space, we will pay for that difference to ensure that we get the street typology that we want to see on the street. And then the last is the Great Streets. Requiring for additional height and density. So if in the downtown space a developer wants to do a project and they want to have additional entitlements to their project, we might require these as a cost to the developer. The urban design, in partnership with the Comprehensive Planning Division, does corridor studies and neighborhood plans. Traditionally, the Comprehensive Planning Division does in the post-Imagine Austin world, where we're really trying to encourage the collaboration between departments and really trying to get buy-in and synergize the particular efforts and planning processes and goals of different departments. We're bringing a lot more people into the process, and so we're actually bringing now all of these different players into our planning processes, both neighborhood plans, but I think the reality is, and as we move forward, the corridors are going to be a really prime opportunity to address how we channel redevelopment opportunities. And so we're getting started on the Vernon-Anderson corridor planning process now. And a major challenge for us is a small parcel size, but then also, as I alluded to earlier, the significant number of driveway space and consolidating that in some way through some incentives. We don't have the answer yet, we're looking at this, but finding some way to consolidate those number of driveways is going to be a significant barrier to providing significantly enhanced pedestrian and bicycle space along those corridors. And what we learn from this process will carry over into future corridor plans too. Lastly, kind of a favorite thing of mine, we started the Pedestrian Advisory Council last year. This is a group modeled significantly after the Bicycle Advisory Council, where we're trying to bring in stakeholders specifically geared to answer and address questions pertaining to pedestrian experience, pedestrian infrastructure. Ed and Betty have shown up, Tom's shown up. Who else do I know from? I guess, well, thank you guys for all your hard work. Oh, Gwen's been there before, okay. But we have a lot of landscape design professionals, transportation professionals, neighborhood groups, a lot of staff from various city entities, Capital Metro, Transportation Department, Planning and Development Review. We have TxDOT engaged, as well as the Federal Highway Administration. A lot of different entities show up to work together on pedestrian issues, and we're really pushing the forefront, I think, on some stuff where we provided a 10-page document recommendations for the Land Development Code here a few months back, and currently working on a Vision Zero policy initiative. Vision Zero is the idea that it's totally unacceptable for any fatalities within the road system, as well as zero serious injuries. So, what can we do as a city to encourage policies, program engineering to ensure a safer space for all road users, not just pedestrians, although last few years we've seen a significant uptick in terms of the number of pedestrian fatalities. Peaked in 2012 with 26. That's a third of all traffic fatalities, and we're less than 1% of all road users. So this is a major push on the part of the Pedestrian Advisory Council, and part of it is too working with the Transportation Department. And 2012 there was a traffic safety study done, and we became, after we eclipsed 20 pedestrian fatalities in a year, we became a Federal Highway Administration focused city. So last year they came in and did a pedestrian safety action plan that's still nearing completion. So what is contained within those two documents, the traffic fatality report is about ready to come out with an update. So what's contained within those documents we're going to use to really fill in the gaps on that and really push for increased safety efforts within the city. And on that, I'll take questions. Yeah.
You talked about in the Imagine Austin plan that the priorities were ranked, and that compacted connected is number one. To the extent there's some conflict, do you resolve it in the order of the priorities? I mean, assuming there is some conflict, just for the sake of argument.
No, I wouldn't think it'd be that simple. It'd be really helpful to have some specific example of what would be a conflict. But there has traditionally, or the last couple of years, some concern within neighborhood groups that there are neighborhood plans that
That's the one that's going to bring up.
Yeah, so there's some tension, at least perceived, within neighborhood plan recommendations and what is now the comprehensive plan. A lot of the neighborhood plans were adopted prior to Imagine Austin. The rub really happens where even if there's conflicts within the content of an individual neighborhood plan and what is perceived to be the standalone Imagine Austin document, the neighborhood plans were adopted as appendices to Imagine Austin. So, you know, honestly, there is a point where we scratch our heads and we don't know what the answer to that is right now. But the Imagine Austin vision is fairly clear in itself, I think, in terms of where we want to go as a city. Yeah.
So, South Lamar, are there any, are you looking at South Lamar and specifically crosswalks on South Lamar? And I'll just give you a quick illustration of the problem here. So, the other day I was going across South Lamar and I wanted to get from here to here. Well, guess what? There was no crosswalk.
Right.
This was a major intersection. I think it was like a fairly major intersection. But there was a crosswalk here, and a crosswalk here, and a crosswalk here. Now,
Is that a retort?
close to Hartford. Yeah, I think it's Mary. Yeah. And so of course, the pedestrian signal is not very accommodating to pedestrians. It takes a long time for that signal to change. So all in all, it took more than 5 minutes just to get from one side of the street to the other.
Yeah, so did you have a signal phase if you wanted to cross directly over?
We couldn't. No, there was no signal to go this way.
Okay.
No, but I think the traffic signal, like, was the traffic stop?
Yeah, so what I'm saying is, even if you don't have the paintings on the street surface, that is a legal crossing point. And so all you have to do is obey the traffic signal and you can cross. You don't have to go three-way.
There was no crossing signal, right? There were crossing signals going all the way around here, but nothing to go across here. So
yeah, you don't have to obey the crossing signal, just the traffic light. Nathan, you had a point on that too.
Okay. I was just I think this is an annoying condition, and crossing the street shouldn't take 5 minutes. So I think you mentioned calling 311 for things. Yeah. It's actually a pretty good system, but the people that get those on the signal side are responsive. And the more you request things like this intersection doesn't work for me walking, you know, if all they hear from is like Lamar needs more time, the traffic is backed up, then you get one type of result. So I would say if you see anything that you feel like could be better, call it in.
For what it's worth, that intersection is one of the most messed up in the entire city, and no one has figured out how to sort it out yet. And there's a reason why there is no crosswalk on that side, which is that a lot of people jump the gun to make left turns ahead of the oncoming through traffic. And so it's very dangerous for people to try and walk through.
Yeah,
it's just a really, really badly messed up intersection.
To echo Nathan's point, though, you know, if no one calls and complains, it's never going to get on the list. So 311 is a vital system, at least, so that it enters the record at some point in time.
I mean, just to elaborate a little more on South Lamar, like the old paradigm on South Lamar, the current paradigm is that there's 38,000 vehicle trips that move along that corridor. So, like, this is Mary that we're talking about?
I think so, yes.
Mary gets a small fraction of the time. That means anybody crossing the street at Mary gets a small amount of time. That means that, you know, people that want to make left turns are very pressured, jump queue, and do squirrely things. So, you know, part of this is that maybe our priorities are changing if people are starting to have those experiences.
Yeah.
To sort of follow on from that example, a concrete one I know well is 29th and Guadalupe. And if you're on the south side of that intersection, there's big signs that say pedestrians do not cross here, so you have to do the three-way cross if you're crossing from the southbound, the south side of 29th Street across Guadalupe. So in that case, I'm sure it wouldn't be legal if it's a sign prohibiting pedestrians crossing.
I would agree with that.
You would agree with that?
I would agree with that.
So, and I imagine that might be the case at Mary also, where the city's, specifically made it extremely inconvenient for pedestrians to cross that street. And Guadalupe, that's right by UT, there's a lot of pedestrian traffic there compared to.
And that may, I assume that's probably the impetus for the signs too, is to sort of channelize that pedestrian crossing point so that it's not a totally unpredictable environment. Tom?
Well, just briefly, I'll mention, there was a traffic pedestrian signal missing on Burnett Road a few years ago. I called in and they installed it, and that was parallel with Burnett. My question, I'll preface by just saying, I realize it's a very specific question, and if you don't want to answer, that's fine. So not so much pressure. But I noticed in the proposition bond proposal that's up for a vote, that's the number, but there's $0 for standalone walking or biking projects in it. And it doesn't seem like it fits with the city's values and so many other documents, and I'm really just very surprised by that, and considering the supposed commitment to walking and biking. One thing that's even more remarkable though is I know the rail corridor, that there are tons of missing sidewalks within the catching area. And then also just when it comes to the bike network, there's almost no all ages and abilities bikeways that lead into that rail network. There are a few, but there are huge gaps. And so especially with the walking, the sidewalk network, is there already, this is a very specific question, do you know if there's already dedicated funding to completing those sidewalk gaps to serve that rail line?
I don't know that. I can say that the sidewalk program is very responsive to working with Capital Metro and other entities in terms of providing for that sidewalk network, including once Capital Metro moved the transit services over to Guadalupe and Lavaca. I think this year they've spent, in the last 6 months even, I think they spent about $500,000 making improvements to the sidewalk network to support access, particularly ADA access to the transit stops. So I would assume if it's not dedicated already, and it probably isn't given the question mark for the outcome of the bond proposal, that they would work to ensure and build out that sidewalk network. Nathan, did you have anything for how bond projects
I
sort
do
of
not
bubble?
know the detailed answer to that, but I would assume that adding the rail on any of those streets would trip into something more like a reconstruction project, in which case it seems like the sidewalks, at least on the corridor itself, would be mandatory, but feeding it.
The street itself, I'm pretty confident those sidewalks will be.
So you're talking about feeding it?
Yeah, feeding into it.
I'm not aware of any provision.
And it's something that sort of still time, but there might actually be funding within that proposition, but it has never been made clear, because there's like vague language about connecting to the rail, but that's one possibility.
Yeah.
Just follow up on that. For the roads portion of what's under Prop 1, wouldn't that be triggered, the reconstruction parts of that new one up planning, wouldn't that trigger provision of bike facilities and pedestrian facilities?
Except for highway overpasses.
You gotta get over the highway on your bike too.
Well, it's not going to be on the highway in order to
No, it's overpass over the highway also.
I don't know, I'm saying, if you go look at the actual list of projects, they're like highway interchange.
It's also Riverside, though, for instance, over I-35, so.
That's in the rail portion, right, not the road portion.
So the answer to your question is the Complete Streets policy would absolutely require an analysis for complying with that policy. The context-sensitive nature of our policy would suggest that for a highway project, you most likely would not be getting the sidewalk infrastructure. Something like Riverside, you would see a different sort of outcome for how that street would be improved.
Can you say something about how the streets downtown get selected or prioritized for getting the great streets treatment, with the wider sidewalks and the bump outs and all that?
Yeah. They have a system. Did you have a specific question?
I was just wondering how it works, how they pick which street gets it and which doesn't.
Oh, they're getting into stuff that I don't know the answer to.
You had a slide on it. There was a slide on it. that you see.
Yeah.
But Robert, I think that great streets and complete streets are sort of two very different things, so.
They are very different things, yeah. Nathan, did you?
I can take an educated guess.
Okay.
If you want that. I think they've been prioritizing streets near Congress. Yeah.
Yes. Streets coming out from the spine of Congress.
And I think Congress is being looked at for a larger, more comprehensive.
Not necessarily under the Great Streets plan, but also streets that are being rebuilt, like 8th Street was recently rebuilt. So yeah, so it came in, and then the other time you'll see a Great Streets project go in is if there's development, private development going in and private development.
Well, that was the north-south Congress-oriented one, but 2nd Street's been a big priority. And, you know, 2nd and 3rd tend to go together. And then Cesar Chavez is also part of that 2nd Street district and was necessitated by the two-way conversion. So I can't tell you what that means in road.
All right, so we got about a half hour left, so we were going to break people up into groups. Two with your hands up. How, on a scale of 1 to 10, how badly do you need to get that question out? I'll take out a 10. Okay.
I understand what a complete street is, but what's the Great Street?
What's that?
What's the mission of the Great Street?
The brainstorming groups?
Great Streets.
Great Streets.
Program.
Oh.
The Great Streets program is a downtown specific program to get a lot of the same elements of what a complete street is, but it sort of focuses specifically on the downtown area. So on 2nd Street, for example, which is the quintessential example of the Great Streets program, you have a 32-foot wide sidewalk space on the north side. And that extra sidewalk space allows for a double row of trees, sidewalk cafes, provision for utilities, that sort of fantastic streetscape experience that you expect in the downtown area. That is different than a complete street in the sense that a complete street would require such things as a sidewalk in a residential street or a neighborhood street. You're not going to have 32-foot wide sidewalks in a neighborhood.
All right, so we're going to finish off tonight with the last half hour by breaking up into 3 groups and just chatting amongst ourselves about groups of 10 about solutions, things we want to see most